Salutations, ladies and doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm. We're crazy riddles. Eh, fuck. God damn it.
We're nearly 350 in, or rather, almost.
400.
Yeah, yeah, and yet we're still fucking it up.
I'm tired, okay? And I've been busy, as you well know.
Yeah, someday we will get this down like professionals, but it is not this day.
Alright. Yes. Let me start over then. Salutations, ladies and doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm. We're social outcasts, crazy riddles, and all around nerds convene talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hi everyone.
And I am
To
your host.
borrow a line from the Dresden Files, one day, one brave and magnificent day, we will actually be cool. Moving on. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, and I'm your host last time. I want to be the brains of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing mostly okay. I had a mostly productive day today, which, for whatever reason, my brain just would not let me research over the last couple days. So, actually, having a productive research day is good, especially because the competition that I'm entering is next week. So, I have a week to get my shit together. And if I had more of a eidetic memory of that particular scene at this point, I would be engaging in Morty's uh, shit monologue, but I do not have a word for word memory of that scene, and so I cannot do Morty's shit monologue.
All right. So we're gonna try and finish, or at least get a portion of an article we started last week. Um, an uncomplicated man, written by Emily Wilson. We're starting where we left off. So if you need to catch up or get reacquainted with it, uh, you can.
It's the
Not
second segment in the previous episode,
which took up about a good.
right after our Odyssey review.
Yeah, but it did take up pretty much the entire.
It did take up a while, didn't it?
Yeah.
But moving forward.
Um, Zeus Law is a version of archaic Greek Xenia, an idealized relationships between strangers, host, and guest who must treat one another with mutual respect, thereby forming multi-generational bonds between unrelated families. In the film, Xenia is filtered through contemporary American ideas about the importance of philanthropic charity. Wealthy people should be gracious towards the poor and hungry in their midst without necessarily doing anything to mitigate their poverty.
Yeah, the I think even that is being charitable to Chris at this point, Emily. Like I said in the at the end of the Odyssey review we did last week, the fact that Christopher Nolan decided to make his take on Xenia so central to the story and then proceed to have a preschooler with special needs understanding of those ideas is frank. Like I despise moralistic pearl clutchers deeply, and I do not co-sign generally the idea that art can even be immoral for the most part. But I think the combination of his stupidity and the intellectually pompous superiority with which he was confident in that idiotic simplicity, and the fact that it's the closest thing I have to a moral system that he's utterly butchering here. Now I'm calling it. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey is not just bad, it is immoral, and he should be ashamed of himself for making it. Moving on.
Yeah. Many of the film's implicit values directly contradict those of Homer's poem. Deception, warmongering, extramarital sex, cruelty to animals, abusing women, and yearning for honor, all perfectly fine in the world of Homer, are in this version very bad.
You're half right. I think it's still engaging in a little bit of what the sociologists call presentism, to call what some of the women in the Odyssey go through abusive. I don't think that, or at least I hope, the idea of honor has not fully gone out of fashion, much less being classed as immoral. Also, deception, tactical deception, when one is in a survival scenario or a war scenario, I would go so far as to say that's not immoral even now. Like, deception for deception's sake, sure, but deception for deception's sake has always been a bit untoward, even by ancient Greek standards. Deception for tactical, either in war or tactical in a survivalist scenario, which is most of the deception that Odysseus engages in, it has never been particularly immoral, and I really hope it's not now, because if the modern day definition of morality is no, you shouldn't try to deceive the Cyclops that's very obviously going to eat you and has already eaten several of your comrades. If that is how far modern morality has fallen, to where you can't deceive the cannibalistic monster that is trying to eat you, I'm not gonna co-sign modern morality. Granted, based on Christopher Nolan's understanding of these things, that is apparently immoral. But I will highlight again, and I will be charitable to the modern man in the sense that I don't think the average modern person, or even the average modern intellectual, like Emily is here, is so stupid as to say that deception when one is in a life and death scenario and in danger of being eaten by a giant monstrous creature, I don't think even the most out of touch hoity-toity modern intellectuals, for the most part, would be willing to advance the notion that lying to the Cyclops that's trying to eat you is immoral. I really hope we haven't fallen that far. The worst I think modern intellectuals might do is try to frame Polyphemus as the victimized party in that scenario, but that would require more redefinition and recontextualizing of the story to make happen. And mercifully, the smallest of silver linings here is Christopher Nolan doesn't understand human nature or human emotion well enough to frame the Cyclops as the victim of Odysseus here. So at least not in the modern moralistic way that we tend to mean it when we say victim. Obviously, he is de facto the victim of Odysseus because he was blinded by Odysseus. But like, in terms of the moral weight we lend to the category of victim in the modern intellectual zeitgeist, no, I don't. Christopher Nolan may have been a stupid and immoral coward when he made his Odyssey, and he is, but he's not so mentally warped or capable of emoting enough to try to frame Polyphemus as the victim of Odysseus here in the modern moral sense anyway. Moving on.
All right. This is not in itself a problem, but it is a problem if the film's own values and vision don't hang together, and if the characters' motivations don't make sense on their own terms.
I mean, I'm gonna go one step further than you are, Emily, and say that it is in and of itself a problem. If you're adapting the Odyssey and you completely recontextualize the moral language of the Odyssey, then at that point you should at best create like a thematic rendition of the Odyssey, a little bit like Ulysses or something along those lines, rather than trying to keep it within the confines of the Odyssey. I think that's one of the largest problems with what Nolan tried to do. Instead of create like a modern day war on terror or post Vietnam version of the Odyssey and allow the difference in setting to account for the different like moral framework. I think if he had done that, we would have just gotten another generically mid war movie like Dunkirk. And while that would still be bad, and I still wouldn't enjoy it because Christopher Nolan is still a hack, it wouldn't have shat all over one of the most formative stories in my childhood, and B, wouldn't have been abjectly historically illiterate about the notions of debt, obligation, the rights of guest and host, and the ancient, immutable, like cross-cultural laws of hospitality. But because Christopher Nolan decided he wanted to adapt the Odyssey sans like thematic cribbing and temporal and contextual transplanting, because he decided he wanted to do a version of the Odyssey, him deciding to mangle the Odyssey into a like post Vietnam War or post 9/11 PTSD story, where the warfare was fought not because of anything relating to myth or gods, but by virtue of economic bullshit. A lot of the most terrible aspects of Nolan's Odyssey come from the fact that rather than create his own like thematically echoing version of the Odyssey and call it something else and set it in a completely different context, because he decided not to do that, that's part of what makes his Odyssey as bad as it is, because he decided he's going to take a story that has stood the test of time for 3,000 years and jam a fucking post Vietnam, post 9/11 wedge into the middle of it, no matter how many layers of story and character and intrinsic metaphysics it fucks up. Moving on, though.
I'm back, by the way.
Yes.
Nolan's Odyssey, slaughtering people with the help of trickery, technology, and weapons is presented as bad when the Greeks are killing the Trojans, who have violated Xena, but good when Odysseus is killing the suitors, who have violated Xena. Taking something ostensibly abandoned by Odysseus and his comrades is natural and forgivable when the Trojans lay claim to the horse, but unnatural and unforgiving when the suitors lay claim to Odysseus's palace, food, wine, and wife. Strangers in Ithaca are to be treated with gracious kindness as possible gods in disguise, but strangers in foreign lands are usually monstrous, to be blinded, robbed, and slaughtered. Defying the gods is noble and brave when Odysseus blinds Polyphemus, son of Poseidon. It's stupid and greedy when Eurylochus eats the cattle of the sun. Deception is bad when Odysseus tricks Sinon or the suitors trick Telemachus. but good when Telemachus and Odysseus trick the suitors. Sharing is good, and Odysseus is seen taking his place at a oar alongside his men, but one man rule is also ambiguously good. And those who challenge monarchy or autocracy or try to eat more than their allotted portion are either evil, Thucydides, or foolish, Eurylochus. Either way, they have to die. It is bad to fight and kill to accumulate wealth, as Agamemnon does. It is good to fight and kill to preserve the wealth that you have already acquired, even if by war. Any of those moral contradictions could make for an interesting and unitive theme in a movie, but Nolan lets the fragments of an incomplete set of big ideas spin around in the epic whirlpool with no plank of solid, specific human experience for which we might cling.
Okay, some of those I agree with you. Some of those are an artifact of Christopher Nolan not understanding a damn thing about the thing he's trying to adapt and utterly contradict themselves. But I will point this out again for the record. Deception for its own sake has almost never throughout history been considered a virtue. Deception for tactics or survival is a different ball game. I'm not saying there aren't childish, dick-headed contradictions in Nolan's version of the Odyssey that make it utterly irreconcilable and nonsensical. There are, but some of those, Emily, are again you kind of projecting presentism onto the source material, and just because your presentism is far less egregious than Nolan's presentism doesn't mean I'm not going to call it out, because it is a little bit of the past was primitive, the past was myopic, the past was, all those bad, no good, Hegel's dialectical history kind of things. But even the Greeks understood this thing called context in a lot of cases. And in context, willfully deceiving for nothing but your own personal gain is quite different from deceiving an enemy that you're either at war with or in a survival conflict with, i.e. the Cyclops, i.e. Polyphemus. So while I agree with your overall point that Christopher Nolan is a self-contradicting idiot and didn't think any of this through, you are also guilty of a similar blind spot by saying that deceiving the Cyclops in order to blind him for your own survival, or killing the suitors who have for a decade and some change abused your household, your wife, your son, and the sacred laws of hospitality, even though Christopher Nolan has no idea about what those are or how to fucking portray them. Those aren't the same thing, and weren't viewed as the same thing in the ancient Greek period. The ancient Greeks, much like modern people, had this thing called nuance, i.e. some things are okay in certain contexts and not okay in others. Does Christopher Nolan completely bugger any of these distinctions and commit the blind spot of presentism 1,000-fold compared to what you're committing it here? Yes, but as one Odyssey fan and Christopher Nolan skeptic to another, just because you're doing it less egregiously than Nolan doesn't mean you're not doing it.
Are you done?
Yeah, moving on.
Homer's Odyssey gives a clear, moving account of the feelings, histories, and perspectives of several of Odysseus's comrades, subordinates, including Eurylochus and the enslaved swineherd Eumaeus. Kidnapped, trafficked, and sold into slavery as a child, Eumaeus fantasizes that his long-lost enslaver, Odysseus, will one day return and give him a home of his own. In the film, none of these subordinate characters has a personality of their own. Mentor, Ryan Hurst, who helps Telemachus, Tom Holland, is not a disguised goddess, but a helpful guy with a beard. Eurylochus is not an embittered rival to Odysseus, but another helpful guy with a beard. John Leguizamo does his best with the part of Uranus, now cursed with cataracts, to ensure that he is unable to recognize Odysseus until the right moment. But Nolan's script gives him nothing to work with. The only wish of this servant, the film's preferred term for slave, is to make Odysseus' life more comfortable. But Damon's Odysseus remains miserable as he hikes doggedly towards the camera across yet another beautiful landscape.
Okay, Emily, this was I think where your intersectional feminist lens is coming in here, and it's blinding you again. The difference between the way the suitors treat Eumaeus and the way Odysseus and his father Laertes treated Eumaeus is one of these was a good master and treated him well, and one of these is a complete shitstirrer who does not see anything about him as valuable. Again, I don't mean to be a dick here, but one, there were subtle class distinctions between different kinds of slave in the Greco-Roman context, and two, as counterintuitive it may seem to us, and sounds a little bit like the house N-word issue here, the idea of being happy under the purview of a good master is not only not a unique work of ancient Greece, it's something that endured pretty much until the Enlightenment. Because the idea, or at least part of the idea, was to serve someone who deserves to be served is not necessarily a travesty. Now, does that excuse the inegalitarianness of it? No, of course not. And was it a good thing for the Western world to abolish slavery? Yes, of course it was. But one, being a slave in ancient Greece or in ancient Rome was not the same as being a slave during the transatlantic slave trade period. And two, much like the aforementioned presentism, you seem to be unaware of the distinction between a good and bad master, which again is seemingly counterintuitive and heretical from modern Western perspectives, but it's been a thing since humans started engaging in social hierarchies, pretty much. That's why so many of medieval romances and stuff were about putting the rightful true king back on the throne, not just because there was an issue of divine right at play with putting the good king back on the throne, but part of what made one a good king in the medieval period, and there are antecedents of this idea in ancient Greece, is the concept of noblesse oblige, i.e. a good king is a good king not just because he is divinely ordained, but also he is divinely ordained because he is a good master and he is obliged to be a good master. Moving on.
Of course. Trojan War is an aberration, the fault of faceless, monstrous Agamemnon, the one in the weird Darth Vader outfit, who has failed as an American family man by killing his daughter. Odysseus is an idealized leader who would never willingly put his people in danger. His foolish men insist on going to check out Circe's hut for themselves, and he kindly retrieves them without pausing to have sex with the goddess even for an hour, let alone a whole magical year.
Okay, so here's the thing. Epic the Musical also skips over the fact that Odysseus and Circe got busy and in fact conceived 2 children together. But even in the original Odyssey, him getting busy with Cersei was not considered an infidelity as we would consider it now, because at no point is Odysseus prioritizing his enjoyment with Cersei over his desire to get home um, to Penelope and Telemachus. The same thing happens with Calypso. She does not treat him badly in the original poem, and they do have sex multiple times. But the betrayal that would be considered an infidelity is choosing his momentary pleasure with people like Cersei and Calypso over his love and obligations to both Penelope and Telemachus. That's what makes Helen's desire to get with Paris and leave Menelaus wanting. That's what makes what she did an infidelity, whereas what Odysseus did was essentially just making the best out of a bad situation.
I'll be right back.
Because both Cersei and Calypso, apart from holding political power over him, which they definitely did, also were varying degrees of goddesses and had a significant degree of power over him. And so deciding to acquiesce to their charms, both, again, to make the best out of a bad situation, but also as a tactic, because, you know, people tend to be slightly better disposed to people that fuck their brains out, but good. There's no more diplomatic way to put that. But at no point is what Odysseus does considered infidelity by the Greek standard, because according to the Greek standard, as long as he doesn't abandon Penelope and Telemachus in his heart, and as long as he remains steadfast in his conviction that he loves Penelope and Telemachus and wants to get home to them above all, having a little bit of extramarital sex, not necessarily a bad thing, especially when the person you're having extramarital sex with is a goddess with considerably more power over you than you have over her. Odysseus had more power over Cersei after eating the mole, but when push comes to shove, he is still a mostly mortal man, although his grandfather is Hermes via, I believe, his mother's side. But yeah, Odysseus is still a mostly mortal man, and Cersei is a goddess twice over. First, because she's a nymph, but also because her father was Helios, and that was one of the main primary sources of her magic. So yes, modern day interpretations tend to skip over the issue with Cersei because it's hard for the modern Western mind to countenance the idea that someone can, under varying degrees of duress, be forced to have sex, even sex they would enjoy, but still not be unfaithful to their significant other because they never betrayed them in their heart, so to speak. It's very hard for modern day viewers to square that circle. But it was not hard for the ancient Greeks to, which is why Epic the Musical skirts around it, as does this version. Although Epic the Musical still keeps the essence of the thing, where even though Odysseus doesn't take Cersei to bed, and certainly doesn't get 2 children on her, he still struggles with the juxtaposition between how good it could be with Cersei and also his loyalties to Penelope and Telemachus. So yes, it's rather hard to portray the sexual aspects of the relationships between Odysseus and Circe and Calypso in the modern context, and so a lot of versions skirt around it. But Epic the Musical still keeps the spirit of the thing, and is infinitely better than Nolan's version, because in Nolan's version, they don't even spend a year and a day with Circe. The problem of the time scaling is a major issue with Nolan's version, because it really feels like everything just kind of happens one right after the other, and there's not really much length in between the events. And as both me and Brainstorm are covered in our review, being made to feel the length of the journey is a crucial part of the Odyssey. And if you don't do it, you have well and truly fucked up. And now we wait for Brainstormer to come back.
I'm back.
Okay. Moving on, then.
1 second. Eating.
Yep.
Okay. Damon's Odysseus is motivated mostly by anxiety and guilt, though he is also eager to protect his boy. Holland is good at playing a gormless young man of 20 going on 12.
Yeah, this one isn't Nolan's fault. It's not really Tom Holland's fault either, apart from the fact that he definitely should have read the source material or some version of the source material. And again, I don't even need the people making this to go all the way back to like the Samuel Butler's translation. I'd be happy if they just, read through or listened to Stephen Fry's version and then watched through the like Epic the Musical compilation. That would be fine. But according to interviews with Tom Holland, he thought Telemachus was like 16 throughout the course of the movie. And again, while I would have liked to have seen some effort in the vein of reading the actual thing, some version of the actual thing, I don't think those 4 years between 16 and 20 really make much of a difference. And Tom Holland has the ever youthful kind of Hollywood immortality, much like Robbie Amell, who has been in his like late teens and early 20s for the last 30 years. Tom Holland will just forever be kind of in the limbo between high school and college. And I'm not disparaging him there. That's one of his talents. But yes, that's not necessarily Nolan's fault, nor is it necessarily even Tom Holland's fault. It's just Tom Holland thought that Telemachus was supposed to be like 16 and nobody thought to correct him or make him read the source material in any version. Which, that I do slightly blame Nolan for, but then again, I'm not so sure Nolan read it either. I'm pretty sure he just click noted it. Moving on.
But the representation of Odysseus as a reluctant warlord makes nonsense of the movie's imagined world. We're not shown that war or killing are bad, only that good men sometimes feel bad about it. A very different point. A serious depiction of violence, ancient or modern, must show the perspectives of victims as well as the perpetrators. And the Homeric poems easily clear the bar, but Nolan doesn't. The Trojans are dehumanized by their mask. We know none of them by name or face. The hands of Odysseus and Telemachus are bloodied only by the most righteous computer game modes of killing, and we feel no pity or horror at the deaths of their victims. Whether Trojans, giants, suitors, or slaves, during the sack of Troy, which the he supposedly organized, Odysseus gazes around in bewilderment and horror as if he has never seen a massacre before.
Yeah, again, this is another one of those, you're half right, but your intersectional feminism is getting in the way. The thing is, the question in a lot of ancient Greek morality, such as it was about what does X, Y, or Z situation deserve? What does X, Y, or Z person deserve to have happen? And so the death of cruel people like the suitors is not an occasion for empathy. There is actually quite a lot of empathy for the Trojans in um, in the Odyssey, and in many cases, Odysseus does cry about both the people he's lost via his various misadventures, but also about the unnecessary mistakes and bloodshed of the Trojan War. There's a lot of even the gods, according to most versions of the Odyssey, have a problem with how far they take the looting post Trojan War, and how, and this is another thing I wish Nolan had focused on, but then again he would have fucked it. In addition to the ideas of debt and obligation, and in addition to the idea of hospitality, there's also this idea of divine sanctuary, which existed in the ancient Greek period just as it existed in the medieval Christian one, which is, if especially a woman or a child, but anyone, just especially, it was especially egregious if you did this to a woman or a child. If anyone goes to a temple, to a deity, and proclaims sanctuary there, you're not supposed to be allowed to go in and kill them, or rape them, or torture them, or despoil them, or rob them, and yet so on and so on and so forth. And it would have been a really smart thing for Nolan to do, to bring up the idea of sanctuary in the temples to a deity, especially since he's trying to make the point of violation of the edicts of the gods being an issue here. But he didn't. He just conflated it with hospitality, even though his version of Greek hospitality makes no fucking sense and is frankly immoral in its stupidity. But being that as it may, even by Greek standards, the Greeks take the looting of Troy too far. But death of the wicked, or the dishonorable, or the blasphemous, is not considered a bad thing in ancient Greek terms. So we shouldn't feel bad for the suitors, because the suitors are, to use the modern parlance, a remorseless pack of dickheads. And worse than that, a remorseless pack of dickheads who basically stalemate on a technicality an entire household for more than a decade. So their death is no more egregious than the death of a criminal breaking into your house in the middle of the night and trying to get you to give them all your money would be, because a similar social faux pas, i.e. the violation of, at the very least, the spirit of hospitality for more than a decade, has made the suitors both wicked but also blasphemous, i.e. they managed to stave off their rightful eviction basically just on a technicality, and the gods don't like that kind of technicality mongering as it happens. But yeah, I think there is a little bit of presentism blind spot going on, and possibly a little bit of intersectionalist blind spot going on with your idea that we should feel bad. We should feel bad or just as bad for the suitors and for Polyphemus as we do for the excesses of looting after the Trojan War. And no, not only in the ancient Greek context, but in the practical modern context, I don't co-sign that. The death of people who deserve it is by definition deserved and therefore not particularly at issue. Should we extend as much empathy as we can to as many people as we can? Sure, but there comes a point where that empathy can be abused, and letting people willfully abuse your sense of empathy and justice just so you can feel like a moral person at the end of it, it's not a good thing. Moving on.
Hello, Giant Turtle. Good to see you. I'm doing good. Hope you're doing good. All right. Yeah, we are also invited to despise Penelope's chief suitor, Antinous, opposite mind, for being a coward, a liar, and a schemer. The film asks us both to be horrified at war and to celebrate the action movie sequences in which the reluctant warrior finally gets his hands on his bow and the blood starts flowing. The massacre of the suitors is probably the most enjoyable sequence in the film. The exuberantly villainous Antinous Patterson is the only person on set who seems to be having any fun. Clearly deserves to be stabbed to death with the dagger of Sinon, but he also deserves one of the Oscars that will shower down on this movie like the golden rain of Zeus.
Yeah, that's gonna hurt me. I know Oscars don't mean anything anymore, and they haven't for a decade. I know, or at least a decade, more like 15 or 20 years at this point. But the idea that the allegedly intellectual class of Hollywood is going to sit there and praise this anti-intellectual, anti-historical, anti-storytelling, fucking immoral piece of filth. It is going to sting me. Yes, again, I know Hollywood are idiots. I know Oscars haven't meant anything for decades, but it's still going to hurt because I'm still going to have to watch people far too accustomed to the smell of their own farts praise a movie that I actively consider to be both stupid and poorly made and artistically void and immoral. Moving on.
Alright. Nolan's Odyssey lacks many of the elements that make the poem great. It has nothing convincing to say about time, memory, history, war, or about the relationship between one's warrior's glorious return and the lives of his family, adversaries, comrades, friends, and neighbors. It lacks psychological, emotional, political, and ethical depth. Its narrative structure is gimmicky. The writing is abysmal. None of the characters has convincing motivation for their actions or words. There are no sex scenes, and all the food looks horrible.
Correct. Everything in the thing looks miserable. Although that's probably just Christopher Nolan's usual cinematography, because the man is a hack. But I agree with literally everything else she said in that bit there. In fact, if anything, as we've covered over the course of the last 20 minutes and over the course of the previous episode, I would go so far as to say that because she shares some, not many, but some of the same blind spots as Christopher Nolan, she doesn't go quite as far as we should go in our condemnation of this as stupid and void and annoying and ahistorical and artistically without merit. And again, speaking as someone who considers ideas like the laws of guest and host, like hospitality, like the idea of debt and obligation, like the idea of the sworn oath and the freely given value of one's word to be my primary means of a moral compass insofar as I have one, this movie is immoral. I don't like morally condemning art. I really have a hard time believing that art can even meaningfully be called immoral. But through a once in a generation combination of idiocy and lack of artistic merit and historical illiteracy and mythological illiteracy and just metaphysical illiteracy, Christopher Nolan has crossed the line. He he was too much of an idiot to know anything about the ideas with which he was playing, and then he decided to make those ideas that he had at best um a preschooler with special needs understanding of the central axis of his movie. So yeah, no, this movie is immoral. I'm just going to say it. I don't like saying it. It's not a label I would apply readily to virtually anything else. But this is a special kind of stupidly evil. And so, nope, it's immoral. That the line must be drawn here this far, no further. Moving on.
The most troubling ethical problem with Nolan's Odyssey concerns the decision to film part of the movie in the occupied territory of Western Sahara, thus normalizing the ongoing violence against the indigenous Sahrawi people. It's particularly galling that Nolan uses this land simply as a visually striking backdrop for a film that centers, aggrandizes, and redeems the hero of territorial war on account of his belated and partial acknowledgement of his own guilt.
Okay, there's the intersectional feminist shining through. This has nothing to do with the movie. This has nothing to do with the movie and everything to do with your political lens, Emily. I was with you for about 30 to 45% of this rant or this review of yours, but that's just not germane to anything. Real world politics, or politics that's not germane either to the history or mythology we're playing with, has nothing to do with anything. There are many, many, many flaws with this movie. It is a repugnant piece of shit. But it's not a repugnant piece of shit because something more real world themes. It's a repugnant piece of shit because it is the most simultaneously smugly self-satisfied and literally retardedly idiotic incompetence I have ever seen. And it makes a practice of shitting on the closest thing I have to a moral compass and making that a central axis of its story. So, yep, no, this movie is terrible in all the ways a movie can be terrible. But it has nothing to do with real world politics and has nothing certainly to do with real world geopolitics from 3,000 years and some change after the thing it's adapting came into existence. So no, I'm sorry, I can't co-sign any part of that. I've been able to at least partially co-sign quite a lot of the points she's made, but that's the intersectional feminist framework coming in, and it's nerfing what is otherwise a really good argument. Moving on.
Despite all this, the release of the Odyssey is still an event to celebrate. In what we are told is a streaming era, this epic is bringing audiences back to cinemas. And what we are told is a time of declining literacy and the death of the humanities. Translations of the Odyssey, including mine, are flying off the shelves. Some of those who buy the book or show up in cinemas to watch Tom Holland may go on to study ancient Greek. Perhaps the film will persuade a few college administrators not to cut their literature, language, and history departments. Probably not. Nolan, who studied English at University College London, where students still study the Odyssey as a first-year foundational text, is doing his best to get the general public reading again, and I am grateful.
Wait. Christopher Nolan is an English lit grad? I redouble all of my decrying of this movie as an immoral piece of shit. If you can honestly tell me, Chris, that you went through an English lit grad, where, as Emily points out, the Odyssey is a foundational text, at least as it relates to the broader Western canon. And this is what you took from however many years you had in fucking English literature in presumably a fairly high-end university. No, Chris, as much as I am an advocate for Hanlon's razor, and I am, never attribute to malice what can adequately be explained by incompetence, we have now just reached the point where the incompetence is no longer adequate. You must actively be being malicious because you're too old and too white to have gotten into college on a fucking affirmative action scholarship. So you must have had at least some intellectual heft to you to have gone into a British university 20 to 30 years ago and get a English lit degree. So yeah, no such person could possibly be so incomprehensibly stupid and evil and idiotic about the Odyssey. We have reached the point where my charity has officially run out. In a more civilized age, you would be shot for this kind of bullshit. Nolan. Moving on.
1 sec.
Yeah, I honestly hope Christopher Nolan dies screaming for this. I've hated him for a long time, and it's mostly just been petty bullshit. But for this kind of pseudo-intellectual scandal, he should die screaming. Though Emily is right about at least one thing, which is preparing myself for this movie did remind me just how close I hold the Odyssey to my heart. So there is some good in that. I personally have like 5 different translations and adaptations of it in my Amazon cart right now, and as soon as I have any extra money to my name, I'm getting the majority of them. Won't have much money to my name for the rest of this month though, because God, the project I'm doing for Seven Pearls is making my wallet cry.
Okay, I might have to skip that one. The Hollywood Reporter one for now. So I can figure out what the fuck is going on.
It flipped shit and made you and tried to make you pay for things.
No, I'm using the archive version, but it's taking forever to load. So
Ah,
yeah.
so if anything, we will return to it when Brainstormer's computer is no longer deciding to be a potato. The way I just said potato just made me think of that one episode of El Tigre where um what was the girl's name in El Tigre? I forget her name.
Frida.
Frida. She puts she throws a potato into Zantana of the Dead's guitar and it explodes twice. Once in the beginning of the episode and one second time more deliberately when she does it on purpose.
Okay. So this is a Polygon article then.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 1 sec to share. Stream's controversial Battlefield refund could set a dangerous precedent. Written by. I honestly don't know. Okay, written by Ashley Cladino. Published August 10th, 2026.
Okay. In other words, for those not paying attention, this is a games journalist whining that the fans are getting things that they actually want, even if those things just include a justifiable refund.
All right. All right. Battlefield 6 unexpectedly. God damn it. Okay. Unexpectedly removed fan favorite game modes such as King of the Hill, Squad Deathmatch, and Rush. This sparked anger in the community because players could no longer access modes that they consistently return to in the history of the franchise. Explore everything once. A particular disgruntled fan decided they'd had enough and took it up with Steam support to ask for a refund. In the refund request, they pointed out that several modes shown as available on the Battlefield website were no longer listed on the community broadcast page and had been removed without notice. Despite having played Battlefield 6 for over 470 hours since launch day, the support agent agreed that it wasn't right and refunded the game in its entirety, amounting to the $109.24 that they paid on launch day for Battlefield 6 Phantom Edition. Explore Everything Once added a screenshot of their Steam purchase history as proof of the refund. Battlefield Studios, you don't get to remove the game I play and still keep my money. The unhappy customer said triumphantly at the end of their post.
That's good. There is literally nothing wrong detected other than the fact that you have a problem with this. This is what we used to call in a more civilized age customer service. If you substantially remove large swaths of your product, the product that I bought so as to own it, no, I am at least justified in pursuing a refund. Now, granted, not everyone is going to be so motivated as to pursue a refund, but again, in a more civilized age, before the dark times, before the bullshit, this was just called customer service. And the only thing wrong, so far as I can tell, is that you, Polygon journalist, are going to get on a moral high horse and grandstand against basic bitch customer service somehow. Moving on. Also, my kitty says hello. He just came in.
His effort.
Really good point.
Because these claims rely on hearsay and a screenshot, there is no way to confirm how true they are. It is strange that Steam would grant this refund request, considering that Battlefield Studios made a statement about the recently vaulted video game modes. Some game modes are more popular than others, which leads to inactive servers. To combat this, the devs temporarily removed game modes and put them on a weekly rotation. This decision was made to incentivize players to try different modes and increase active players to prevent dead servers. The refund was a permanent solution to a temporary situation, and it might have just led to something much bigger, considering that the post got a lot of impressions within a few days. Other displaced players might just flood Steam support with similar refund requests, whether to return Battlefield 6 or any other game.
Good. If you can't maintain the content that your customer base purchased lawfully, then return that which you apparently thought yourself entitled. This is just customer service, and it is a good thing. I am not surprised we have a Polygon journalist arguing with basic customer service, given how ready and willing they are to engage in the toxic fandom narrative. But I never thought they would stoop so low as basic bitch customer service is now part of toxic fandom because reasons.
Steam's return policy says that players can refund games and software with no questions asked if they have less than 2 hours of playtime. Only for less than 2 weeks. However, gamers who fall outside of these limits can still request a refund and plead their case to a support agent. Steam then reviews the request and makes a decision. The original poster believes the leniency shown on Steam's part was due to the fact that they had been a customer for 22 years, have over 2,500 games on their account, and this was their first refund request. Even so, it would be unfair for this player to receive a refund while others are stuck with an unwanted game in their library. If this refund can be applied to more players, it seems that Steam's policy is flexible enough to include refunds for games that no longer feature content that was promoted as available at launch.
Yes. That is precisely what should happen. It should apply to everyone. I don't see your issue here, other than you don't like the idea that corporations should have to do apparently literally anything to please their customers. Because having any kind of standards at all for the product that you paid for and thus should lawfully own is toxic fandom now, apparently. Somehow. According to the standards of Polygon Journal. I'm not surprised necessarily. I'm just fascinated at how deeply Polygon is interested in digging the hole for itself. Moving on.
Regardless of what led Steam to allegedly make this decision, many other players will feel that they are entitled to the same treatment as they might be in a similar situation, especially considering that dozens of multiplayer games have featured modes that have been vaulted due to server inactivity. Steam might just have its hands full with refund requests from now on.
Good. They should get refunds. Because that is some bullshit. When you buy something under the understanding that you own it, the person who sold it to you does not get to retroactively strip out things that you bought and owned legally. Like if I buy a book and under the assumption that I own that book, and then I find the author or even just the publisher in my house someday ripping out random pages of that book, I am going to be quite cross, do you see? And I am going to sue their ass, or failing that, get myself a refund. it is good that gamers are getting that, and this should be universalized, especially given the recent digital everything fiasco from PlayStation. Because as the internet has made quite iconic at this point, if buying something does not result in owning it, then pirating a thing is not stealing it. If pirate if buying is not owning, then piracy is not stealing. And only Polygon could ever see more people getting the things they deserve to get because of basic bitch customer service as a bad thing. Moving on.
All right. It's from Otaku.com, written by Zach Zwiezen, published August 7th, 2026. Id Software dev says Xbox doesn't understand art and that after layoffs, it is impossible to make big games like Doom the Dark Ages. Id Software vet Chris Hayes says entire departments have been gutted.
Okay. While I am sympathetic to the argument that corporations don't understand the art that they make when they are corporations involved with making art, I am not sure why Kotaku, of all things, would be siding with this premise unless they think that they understand art better than corporations do. And if that is the assumption we are playing with, Kotaku, allow me to laugh in your hypothetical face. Ah ha ha ha, ah ha ha ha, ah ha ha. It is to laugh. The idea that the entertainment journalist has any understanding of art whatsoever in the year of our Lord 2026 is just it's the only thing potentially more laughable than the idea that corporations understand art at this point. The the only life form lower than a corpo is a journo in the year of our Lord 2026. Moving on. Brilliant story.
Oh god damn it! I muted myself real quick so I didn't make noise while you were talking. I read like a fucking paragraph.
Wah, 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 wah.
Keep in mind
Someday,
by the time,
some brave and magnificent day, we will be cool. Moving on.
okay, just keep in mind that by this time, like during the weekend, I'm usually like asleep. So
Mhm.
okay. Chris Hayes, id Software's lead services programmer, has been at the company for over 15 years, and he's one of the devs who remains at the studio behind Doom, following Xbox's massive layoffs in July. While Xbox and studio leadership claim that id can ship a game like Doom 2016, again with fewer people, Hayes disagrees and claims Microsoft doesn't understand video games.
Microsoft doesn't understand video games. This much is true. However, one, the reason why Microsoft is laying off a bunch of people is because they're not profitable and or good at their jobs. And two, um, I'm somewhat skeptical of anyone working in an industry in 2026 because every industry has been befouled by any number of things. And three, I get the feeling that the Kotaku journalist Journo wrote this to be on the developer's side, but as we just covered, the very notion that a journo in 2026 knows anything about art is side fit to bursting laughable. Moving on.
In a recent interview with the Well Played podcast, Hayes openly talked about the status of id Software following the recent layoffs, and the studio, who has worked on games like Doom Eternal and Doom the Dark Ages, didn't hold back about how he feels regarding Xbox, the layoffs, and Game Pass. It is hard to make a game that is AAA that's like we've done before with half the people, and by hard I mean impossible, said Hayes in a clip of the interview that's going viral on social media. It's hard to make a game when there are entire departments that are gutted that you need, entire disciplines that are gone. No, disciples. I think it's discipline that are gone. So the reassurances that we're still the same id and we're still going to do things. Well, first of all, we're not the same id. We're half the same id.
Honey, the AAA industry has been running on autopilot for like a decade. That's a large part of why these layoffs are necessary. And furthermore, in relation to your point, the AA industry doesn't seem to have this problem. Stuff like Black Myth Wukong, stuff like Helldivers, stuff like I had a third example and then my brain completely obliterated it from my brain. But yeah, look, third example or no third example, the AA industry doesn't have this problem. Expedition 33, that was the other one. Yeah. When a AA industry can produce something as just brain crappingly brilliant as Expedition 33, you'll have to excuse me while I play the world's smallest violin for the AAA industry. At this point, if the entire AAA industry was to evaporate into thin fucking air and the largest industry we could have was the AA industry, I would welcome such an eventuality. Because to borrow a phrase from Stephen King, no great loss. Nothing of value will be lost by the AAA industry in 2020, I almost said 2023, in 2026, I think, because 13 has a 3 in it. But or 33 has a 3 in it. But the AAA industry I almost did it again, in 2026, not 2023, although 2023 wasn't much better. The AAA industry in 2026, if it dies, there is nothing left to mourn. Mostly for the last 10 to 15 years, the AAA industry has been running on autopilot, and so its death will sadden no one, especially not when the AA industry can provide such great examples like Black Myth Wukong, like Expedition 33, like Helldivers, etc. The AA industry is where most of the innovation is actually going. And to your point about resources, those games make sometimes 4 times the amount of numbers and like successful metrics than the AAA industry, with barely a tenth of the resources most of the time. So it's not a resource issue. It's not a corporations don't understand art issue. Well, it kind of is, because corporations don't understand art, and that much is true. But it is, at the end of the day, that most famous of issues to all gamers, namely And say it with me, kids. What you have there, my dear AAA game developer in 2026, is what we call in the industry a skill issue. And much as with all the other skill issues in gaming, I must entreat you now to, what is the phrase? Oh, yes. Get good scrub. For it is written on the fucking 10 Commandments of gaming that thou shalt not attribute to resources what is in fact a skill issue, and thou shalt endeavor at all times to get good scrub. Moving on.
Alright, it's hard to make a game that is AAA that's like we've done before with half the people, and by hard I mean possible. Oh, did I read that? Did I read that? Sorry, I forgot to scroll.
Yep.
Okay. According to Hayes, id Management has been given talking points and has been told by Xbox what they can and can't say. And according to him, it feels like Xbox is trying to reassure the remaining devs at the studio that things are okay, and that id has a future because it doesn't want more people jump ship and then be left with nobody.
Again, in 2026, the entire AAA industry could die and nothing of value would be lost. If anything, that might lead to several of the brilliant people currently working in the AA industry getting cushier jobs and more resources. And I trust the people who gave us Expedition 33 and Helldivers with those resources much more than I do the people at, for example, Bethesda, who sat on their asses not making an Elder Scrolls 6 or another Fallout or another Battlefield for however many years it's been. It's been quite a number of them. So yeah, given that the AAA industry has been running on autopilot and often very ideologically captured autopilot for a decade and some change, replacing them with the AA industry is correct and based as far as I'm concerned. Moving on.
All right. At the end of the day, most of it was just trying to tell us, oh no, everything's fine, things will be okay, said Hayes during the podcast. The same lines that they said publicly, like, oh well, the studio is the size of Doom 2016, or we're close to that same size, and so we shipped that game so we could ship another game, things of that nature.
I would endeavor to point out to the corporations, just as to the devs, you should be more concerned with the quality of the games rather than the number of the games or the speed with which you get them out. I would rather wait multiple years and get something good at the end than be able to get something in 6 months that is absolute bullshit in terms of writing and storytelling and virtually unplayable in terms of interface, which is quite a lot of what the AAA industry has been doing for the last decade and some change. Moving on.
All right. Trying to. All right. Sorry, it just took me a second.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. According to Hayes, at the end of the day. Nope. God damn it. Yeah. Okay. When the post pointed out that Xbox and id's claim that the studio is the same size seems suspect based on how many names you can spot in the Doom 2016 credits, Hayes replied, "There's a reason they say close to, because it is less." Kotaku has reached out. Well, okay, actually, do you have anything to say on that, or?
No.
Okay. Kotaku has reached out to Xbox for more information and clarification. Hayes also shared some critical words about Xbox's popular Game Pass subscription service, because its software is owned by Bethesda, which is owned by Xbox. All the studio's games are available day one on Game Pass, so a large chunk of the Xbox fan base can, on Xbox PC, doesn't have to buy a single new game published by Microsoft. Yet Hayes says Xbox would still criticize Bethesda's
Bethesda.
Bethesda's Bethesda's sales numbers. "I know that id has serious issues with how Game Pass is done," said Hayes. "Whenever we see the financial reports that say that were poor sales under Bethesda, like, what's a sale? If you have Game Pass, are you saying poor sales means a poor number of games sold?" Because
It's funny. Back when Bethesda was
there's like one sentence left.
go ahead.
Because of course Xbox isn't doing a game sold business model.
Okay, so here's the thing. If the numbers were actually good, you wouldn't have to play this quibbling bullshit definition game. If the numbers were actually good and Bethesda was still one of the most influential game studios in the history of gaming, like it was in the heyday of Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, you wouldn't be having this issue. And incidentally, relating to the "there are fewer people now" thing, if those fewer people are people who are actually good at their jobs, and the majority of what was cut recently is largely dead weight or people getting in the way of producing more in the vein of your Skyrims, your Fallouts, etc., then that's a good thing. I would rather have fewer people who are actually capable of doing their jobs to actually do them than I would a surplus of people who are not interested in doing their jobs and can sit on the next major game release for a decade and some change. So again, skill issue, and again, nothing of value was lost, it seems. Moving on though.
At the end of the viral clip, Hayes also criticized Xbox and claimed the company fundamentally doesn't understand art or video games. "If you cut half the studio and don't take into account how it's made," says Hayes, you don't understand the cohesion between our teams was a part of what made it successful.
Well, again, Bethesda hasn't made anything for like a decade, or at least nothing that actually made any headway. Nothing comparable to a Skyrim or a Fallout. So I must again say nothing of value was lost and skill issue. I'm sorry you lost your job, and I'm pretty sure that is very stressful for you. But as my friend Nick frequently tells me, where's my Elder Scrolls 6 or my Fallout 5 or whatever number they're supposed to be on. So like again, if you're one of the people getting in the way of Bethesda being as good as it once was, or id Software being as good as it once was, then cold and callous as it may be, get the good scrub or get the out. These are your only options. You can either get good at your job, in which case you will be indispensable and you will not be fired, or you can get out because you're not good at your job. And at the end of the day, both the fan satisfaction and the financial bottom line dictate that dead weight must be lost. Moving on.
All right. Angela News Box Boss, Asa Sharma, sorry. Um, God damn internet.
Mhm.
Yeah, give me a second. The damn thing. Yeah. Okay. These. Yep. Okay. Intel new Xbox boss Ashish Sharma announced that the company would cut 1,600 jobs that month, and 1,600 more people would be laid off before the end of the year. These cuts were brutal, and when they're all done, will represent around 20% of Xbox's total head. As a result of layoffs and changes, Xbox also devised for some studios it had bought, bought over the years, including Double Fine and Compulsion Games. In an email to employees last month, Sharma, called the layoffs and audio and studio changes the most significant restructure in Xbox history.
If those 3,200 jobs were not doing their jobs, were not good at their jobs, then while it's financially inconvenient for them, if you're not good at your job and you're preventing the studio from being as successful as it was in its heyday, get thee gone. My sympathies are nil because I know how shitty the AAA games industry is right now. And I know how much easier it is to look at the AA industry and look at how good it is doing. Things like Black Myth Wukong, things like Helldivers, things like Expedition 33. If
Uh,
if the AA industry can kick the AAA industry's ass, then the AAA industry need to ask itself what it's doing wrong, and also possibly fire a bunch of people in the AAA industry and see how many of those brilliant people who are doing brilliant things in the AA industry you can hire and get over in your respective field. It's kind of like when indie comics outsell the big two, and I'm like, why doesn't the big two, you know, fire the people who are currently failing to be as important as the big two should be, and hire some of the people who are outselling them? And usually the answer I get is because the people who are outselling us are immoral, therefore derp derp logic. And I'm sorry, but the biggest dollar is still a dollar, and a healthy industry is still a healthy industry. These are the facts. And as it happens very often, when the bottom line hurts enough at last to make the corporations notice, nothing of value is lost in getting rid of all the dead weight and hopefully outsourcing your now vacant talent positions to people who actually know how to write stories that people would actually like to read or play in the case of video games. Like I would probably write Dr. Fate for DC pro bono, like entirely. I would, if I had money, I would pay them to let me write Dr. Fate for them. But instead they're not doing that. And so my sympathy, she continues to death spiral.
you done?
Yep.
All right. Moving on. Lastly, that was the end of the article.
Mhm.
Moving on to what Dawn has wanted me to cover for a couple of weeks now, but now we have a spot open.
Mhm.
Trailer for Ebenezer, starring Johnny Depp, Ian McKellen, Rupert Grint, and Sam Claflin.
It's good to see Johnny Depp back in movies again. Like, I know after the shit show that was the trial, he took a break to focus on his music for a bit, and I'm happy for him. But I
Yes.
also like seeing Johnny Depp in things, so it's good to see him back in the
Um,
saddle, so to speak.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I like while I was trying to read that, I was like falling in and out of the last article. I was falling in and out of sleep, so it really threw me to move it along here.
Yep, candy canes.
Candy canes. I wonder if this is gonna kind of be along the lines of like maybe like in terms of Christmas Carol adaptations,
Mm-hmm.
either Muppets Christmas Carol, which is like one of the better ones, or what was that Guy Pearce's one from a few years back?
The FX one.
Yeah,
It's probably gonna do some It's probably gonna try to innovate a bit, probably by focusing more on like Scrooge's backstory. If
yeah,
I had to guess, that's probably why it's called Ebenezer.
yeah.
Um, but even if it's just a more straightforward Christmas Carol adaptation, I am fine with that. Because I'm not one of those people who thinks that remakes are inherently by themselves death. I think the problem is not remakes, the problem is bad remakes.
Yeah.
And this doesn't look like a bad remake.
It,
This looks like a good take on a Christmas Carol to me. Candy canes.
Thanksgiving.
I mean that's a good premiere date because that means it can run throughout the entire holiday season.
Hmm.
Because of course, at least the way I reckon things, the Christmas season starts basically on Black Friday.
Okay. Candy canes.
Candy canes. This just it looks, and obviously I might be a little bit biased here because it is starring Johnny Depp, but it looks almost like what I would expect a Christmas Carol done by Tim Burton to look like.
Huh.
Hmm.
Now I just now I want to see that actually.
Yeah, it would. It as long as Tim Burton's heart was actually in it, because I think the main I think the main problem with Alice in Wonderland and Dumbo is Tim's heart wasn't actually in it.
Yeah.
But but assuming he but assuming he was willing to put his all into it, like he did back in his heyday, or like to be fair, he did in the Beetlejuice sequel. Um, I think I think a Tim Burton Christmas Carol could be good. Then again, so could a Del Toro version. I kind of really want to see a Del Toro version as well. While we're talking about spooky adjacent directors doing a version of Christmas
All right. But candy canes.
Candy canes.
Number 13.
Yep, it looks fun. Um, Obviously there are so many adaptations of A Christmas Carol, and there should be, and and to me, and this is another reason why I don't dislike the idea of remakes, especially when it's something classic like A Christmas Carol, i.e., something that there's been 1,000 different versions of. You get to kind of give personality to like the details, since everybody knows the story of A Christmas Carol. You get to add your own personal touches to the details, and this at least looks fun. And again, it's good to see Johnny Depp back in movies. Not that I would begrudge him his musical career, and he definitely earned it after the bullshit that was his trial. Um, but it's good to see Johnny Depp back in movies. I've also seen a lot of people bitching and whining and complaining and siding with Amber Heard in the comments of Ebenezer. A lot of people think for some reason that he should have been blacklisted from Hollywood forever, even though he was, by and large, I'm not saying always, but by and large, he was the victim more than he was the perpetrator in the Amber Heard case. It was one of the most open and shut cases of same in the history of law in the modern era. Yeah.
So, with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avidazai, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom and fuck off so Brainstormer can go to sleep.
see you guys.